Welcome back to the Deck Forge, where I craft commander decks. Today we're talking about one of the most chaotic, most villainous, and honestly one of the most fun commanders to come out of the Final Fantasy Magic the Gathering set, Kefka Court Mage. Now here's the thing, I wasn't planning on building him at first, but then fate intervened. I opened a promo Kefka in my pre-release kit, and then I pulled another one out of my bundle box. At that point I figured, alright, clearly I meant to build this deck, and I'm glad I did, because Kefka is seriously strong. He's already shown up on CEDH tables, and in casual games, he's just absolute chaos. So let's break down what he actually does. On his front side, Kefka costs 5 mana in Grixis colors. When he enters the battlefield or attacks, each player discards a card. Then you draw a card for each card type discarded this way. Already, that's disruptive. You're chipping away at everyone's hand, and you're refilling yours at the same time. And then there's his transformation ability. For 8 mana, each opponent sacrifices a permanent of their choice, and then Kefka flips, but only at sorcery speed. The backside is where things get completely out of hand. Kefka becomes a 5/7 flyer, and he says, whenever an opponent loses life during your turn, you draw that many cards. So every bit of damage you deal suddenly turns into card draw. And we all know in Commander, once you start drawing too many cards, you usually end up winning the game. When I built this deck, I decided to lean more heavily into the backside, because drawing 15 cards off a single swing just feels like the kind of madness Kefka himself would approve of. But we'll cycle back to why the front side is just as dangerous later. The first thing we need is mana. Kefka costs 5, his flip costs 8, and once you start drawing piles of cards, you want the mana to actually play them. So I packed in a suite of rituals and rocks. Starting with the rituals, Dark Ritual is the classic, 1 mana for 3 black. It's one of the best accelerants in the game, and it can help you sneak Kefka out a turn earlier than people expect. Desperate Ritual does the same thing in red. You need 2 mana to get 3 back. Seething Song turns 3 mana into 5, and is often exactly what you need to power into big turns. Then there's Mana Geyser. This card is absurd in multiplayer. By turn 5 or so, your 3 opponents usually have 15 or 20 lands tapped. Casting Mana Geyser at that point easily gives you 15 red mana. That's enough to flip Kefka immediately and still have mana left over for interaction and combo pieces. For rocks, I've got all 3 talismans, Creativity, Dominance and Indulgence. These are great early plays because they fix your colours while keeping the curve low. Then of course Sol Ring and Arcane Signet, the classics. And at the higher end, I run Gilded Lotus and Relic of Sauron. These might look clunky at first, but once Kefka starts drawing half your deck, having extra sources of coloured mana is the difference between chaining spells and stalling out. So that's our mana base. Fast, explosive, and capable of powering us into those big Kefka turns. Now, Kefka's abilities are already strong, but what if we had more of them? That's where copying and doubling effects come in. For clones, realm sketching is a fun one. It lets you make a token copy of an artifact, creature, or land. Copying Kefka with this gives you an extra ETB trigger to force more discards. Sakashima of 1,000 Faces is the real star. It lets you copy Kefka without worrying about the legend rule. Suddenly, you've got 2 Kefkas on the field, both triggering on ETB and attack. Just note that Sakashima doesn't have a backside, which means his transformation ability doesn't work, so choose wisely which side you want to copy. I also run Sakashima the Imposter. It's less good since it doesn't remove the legend rule, but since it keeps its own name, it will allow you to have 2 copies of either Kefka or one of our other combo synergies. Plus, sometimes you just want to copy an opponent's creature. Spark Double is another all-star, giving you a non-legendary copy of Kefka that comes in slightly bigger. Then we've got temporary copies like Molten Duplication and Twin Flame. Now, you usually don't want to point these at Kefka himself because the legend rule will just wipe the extra copy away, but they're fantastic on your support creatures. Doubling a Harmonic Prodigy or a Roaming Throne for a turn can set up some absolutely wild chains. And if you happen to have Sakashima of 1,000 Faces out, then you can even safely make extra copies of Kefka for a turn, which is usually more than enough to swing a game. For doubling triggers, Harmonic Prodigy is fantastic because Kefka is a wizard. This little 2-drop doubles all of his triggered abilities and even has prowess, so it can chip in for some damage. Roaming Throne does a similar job. You name wizard, and now all of Kefka's triggers happen twice. And then there's Blade of Selves. Giving Kefka Myriad is hilarious. When you swing, you make 2 more attacking copies, which each trigger their own enter the battlefield discard effects. Even if those tokens vanish to the legend rule, the damage has already been done. With these effects, one Kefka feels like 3 or 4. Your opponents will find their hands shredded while you're sitting there with a mountain of cards. So how does the deck actually seal the win? The main win condition comes from Kefka's backside paired with Niv-Mizzet. I run both Niv-Mizzet Parun and Niv-Mizzet the Firemind. The combo works like this. Kefka draws a card whenever you deal damage, and Niv-Mizzet deals damage whenever you draw a card. So once both are on the field, the two start feeding into each other. Draw a card, deal a damage. That damage makes you draw another card, which deals another damage, and so on. The only real risk with the Niv-Mizzet combo is decking yourself, because Kefka will happily draw you into your entire library, but the loop is actually optional. You don't have to point every damage at your opponent. You can just aim the pings at creatures instead. Pause the loop and wait until you're ready to finish the job. The real danger comes from when you start layering in wheel effects. That's where Windfall comes in as a second win condition. Imagine you've just drawn half your deck and you've got Kozilek sitting there ready to reshuffle when discarded. Cast Windfall, suddenly everyone's drawing the same number of cards you just discarded, usually a massive pile. If you've got Sheoldred the Apocalypse out, that's game over on the spot as your opponents draw into lethal triggers. And if not, you can still weaponize it. With Kozilek in the mix, you can recycle your library, set Windfall back up again, and just keep the cycle going until your opponents are flat out decked. Now, Niv-Mizzet Parun is tricky in Grixis because of the triple red and triple blue cost. To get around that, I leaned into Black's reanimation suite. Reanimate, Necromancy, Animate Dead are all cheap ways to bring him back. Chainer Nightmare Adept gives you a repeatable discard plus reanimation, which also helps pitch Kozilek. Victimize can grab 2 creatures at once, and Agadeem's Awakening doubles as a land if you need it early. So whether it's loops, wheels, or just smashing in for damage, Kefka's backside makes sure we see every card we need to finish the game. Now here's the thing, you won't always get to flip Kefka. 8 mana is a lot, and your opponents will do everything they can to stop it, but the front side is still incredibly strong, and we can lean into discard synergies to keep up the pressure. For early game value, I run Tiny Bones Bauble Burglar. Whenever an opponent discards, you exile that card and can play it later. Plus, Tiny Bones can force even more discards himself. Doughty Voidwalker is another all-star here. It exiles anything that would go to an opponent's graveyard, and then you can sacrifice it to play one of those cards for free. Both of these are nightmares for opponents trying to hang on to resources. Then there's Waste Not and Bone Miser. Waste Not rewards you for what your opponents discard, mana, zombies, or card draw, and Bone Miser does the same thing for your own discards. And it gets silly when you're going off with wheels and extra draw. Sometimes you'll pitch 3 lands and suddenly you're adding 6 black to keep the chain alive. Geth's Grimoire is another piece that pushes you over the top. Every time an opponent discards, you draw. That means when you cast a wheel, you're not just refilling your hand, you're doubling, tripling, even quadrupling the cards. And then, of course, there are the oppressive options. Tergrid, God of Fright, lets you steal every permanent your opponents discard or sacrifice. It's brutal, it's soul-inducing, it's exactly the kind of villainy Kefka would approve of. And Archfiend of Ifnir keeps your opponent's boards locked down, handing out -1/-1 counters whenever you discard. So even if Kefka never flips, you're still tearing apart hands, stealing cards, and choking out the table. Now, let's be real. When you sit down with Kefka, you become the problem at the table. Everyone's going to be looking for a chance to take you out. That means we need to protect our key pieces. I run a small but effective suite of counters: an Offer You Can't Refuse, Counterspell, Mana Drain, Fierce Guardianship, and Deflecting Swap. They're cheap, they're efficient, and they buy you the time you need. I also added Essence Flux and Ghostly Flicker. These do double duty. They protect Kefka from removal, and they also re-trigger his ETB when he comes back in. So not only do you save your commander, you force more discard. Now, let me tell you about one of the nastiest plays I've pulled off so far, besides the previously mentioned infinite draw, ping, wheel stuff. I had Kefka on board, a Harmonic Prodigy, a copy of it, and a Cyclonic Rift in hand. I waited until the last opponent's end step. I cast Rift, bounced everything back to their hands. On my turn, I swung Kefka. Thanks to the doubled Prodigies, I got 5 discard triggers. My opponents just picked up their whole boards, and now they had to throw it all in the bin. In my second main phase, I flickered Kefka to do it all over again. That turn, I drew nearly 20 cards while my opponents lost everything they had left. They were completely locked out of the game. I had all of the pieces I needed to win the following turn. It was devastating, and honestly, it felt like the most Kefka thing possible. Pure chaos, pure cruelty, and pure villainy. So that's Kefka Court Mage. This deck is greedy, it's flashy, and it's definitely not budget friendly, but it's an absolute blast to play. If your group allows proxies, this is a perfect candidate because some of the pieces are pricey. Just make sure to let your table know what power level you're bringing so everyone's on the same page. At the end of the day, Kefka isn't about playing fair. He's about being the villain, cackling while your opponents are forced to discard everything and swimming in more cards than you could ever possibly need. So what do you think? Would you build Kefka for his front side, his back side, or go full villain mode like I did? Thank you for watching. I've linked my deck list in the description below. Feel free to take a look. I hope you enjoyed my look at Kefka Court Mage. Think I missed some spicy synergy? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out the full deck list below. Happy crafting. See you on the next one.